Welcome to Legacy Builders, strategies for building successful family enterprises. Brought to you by Beacon Family Office at Asante Financial Management Limited. I'm your host, Corey Gagnon, Senior Wealth Advisor. And on this show, we explore global ideas, concepts, and models that help family enterprises better navigate the complexities of family wealth. Today's guest is Shauna Feth, President and CEO of the Alberta Chamber of Commerce. Shauna is a committed advocate for entrepreneurship and family business. With a decade-long tenure previously as the executive director of the Alberta Business Family Institute, Shauna's passion for fostering entrepreneurial success spans decades. She has spearheaded impactful initiatives, including the Creating Pathways for Entrepreneurial Families initiative, transforming rural family businesses and communities. With a rich background in oilfield consulting and event management, Shauna's dedication extends to co-managing an apiary and influential volunteer roles, shaping the landscape of entrepreneurship and family enterprises in Alberta. My goal is to be the most curious person in today's conversation with Shauna Feth, delving into diverse topics such as family enterprise identification, the critical role of continuity planning, and the importance family businesses have in our communities. With her remarkable journey and rich background in business, Shauna shares valuable insight drawn from her life as part of a multi-generational business family. Now, let's dive in. Welcome, Shauna. We're excited to have you here today and share your wealth of knowledge and experiences with us.
Well, thank you for having me, Corey.
Let's dive right in, shall we?
Sure.
All right. Well, Shauna, imagine you're delivering a commencement speech to the graduating class of 2023, and you have the chance to inspire them with your story. How would you begin your speech to convey the incredible lessons and expertise that you've gained along your career?
I would tell them that just embrace any opportunity that comes your way, any opportunity to learn or grow professionally. I was so incredibly fortunate in my life. I, was born into a third generation business family. So I literally started learning from the day I was born what it meant to be an entrepreneur. My grandmother owned hair salons, and I grew up sweeping floors and being a part of that business from my earliest memories. So it was kind of bred into me, but that part came, genetically or inherited. But I've just had such an amazing journey in terms of the opportunities that have been presented to me and the wonderful mentors and teachers and educators and colleagues that I've been so fortunate and blessed to be able to work with and collaborate with throughout the years and to learn from. So that would be my number one thing, is embrace every opportunity you have to learn and to be mentored and to gain more information. Family enterprise, that's not a calling of choice. It's not something, back when I was in post-secondary that we were talking about. I kind of, evolved into it just because I'm so passionate about the impact that family enterprises have on our communities and our economy. And I'm so passionate about the value that it presented to my family and the value that we saw from being part of a family enterprise, not just financially, but just socially and, emotionally, and our ability to integrate and be part of our community at a different level. So again, just be excited to embrace every opportunity and just be really grateful about where you come from and the gifts that you've been given from your family of origin in order to support you in your journey.
I love that, Shauna. And I want to go down the road a little bit of that opportunity to integrate into the community, because some of these family members may look at it as maybe not an opportunity as you say it, although I think it really is, and there's something there. Can you talk a little bit more of community within the family enterprise space or beyond, and how being a part of a family enterprise gave you that?
Yeah, I could talk about community in different levels, I guess I would say, Corey. So more immediately, family enterprises in our communities they're so supportive they give back. They are really appreciative of the people that are shopping local, buying local, contracting local, that are supporting them and their businesses. And again, the value that adds to their family. So they are so good. Like, this has just been my experience over many, many years. They are so good at giving that back and paying that forward into their communities, whether that be building a new rec center or just sponsoring a sports team or supporting arts and culture events, or any of those critical kind of capstone events that happen in our communities throughout the year. Hands down, you always see family businesses supporting those, and I think that's so important. And then I think too, family business can create a broader sense of community through some of the organizations that are in place to support family businesses. And I think that's really important too, because that's a different type of community. That's a supportive community where they can be accessing other leaders like themselves, and they can be learning from each other's shared experiences. So I think there's kind of two sets of community that, and family business provides so much value in both of those, especially when you have, an organization like Family Enterprise Canada or the Alberta Business Family Institute that are convening these individuals together and giving them the opportunity to share and learn and grow. So I think both sets of communities for family enterprises are so critical and can be so impactful from a learning perspective and from a growth and support perspective for their local communities.
That's great. I love the two sides of community, because the community that supports the business and the enterprise and giving back, but then the community of others that are in the same situation. And, I think that there's many people on this earth that feel alone in their situation, and understanding that there are organizations out there that support the people that are in similar situations is important. So, your involvement in both those organizations that you mentioned has been tremendous. Can you speak a little bit more of your situation growing up and being a part of the family enterprise, and what you see the value of those organizations to be?
Yeah. And so, as you're aware, now I've kind of shifted lanes in terms of my professional career, and I'm very excited to head up the Alberta Chambers of Commerce. But prior to this role, I did run the Alberta Business Family Institute at the University of Alberta for almost 15 years. And during that time, had a very close relationship with Family Enterprise Canada. I've been, kind of a part of the Family Enterprise Advisor designation journey right from the beginning, back when Judy first proposed the concept and said, well, what do you think? And, right from that first conversation, I've been a massive supporter and just have great belief in that designation. And so the two organizations, ABFI, just fantastic in terms of providing, because they're university-based, it's that ability to take the research and what's going on in research and then apply that on the ground to supporting family enterprises, whether it be courses, master classes, whether it be webinars or podcasts, whatever the case may be, they're finding many ways to disseminate that knowledge out to the family enterprise community in the province. And I think that's so critically important. And again, still very passionate about that work, because at the Alberta Chambers, we have over 20,000 businesses across the province that we represent through our membership. And we know a high percentage of those are still family enterprises. So I'm so excited that, we're still able to provide those resources to them. And then nationally through Family Enterprise Canada, it just, again, what I was saying about community, but it just expands that community. So if you're in small town Alberta, you have kind of your little nuclear community, and maybe your nuclear group of advisors or friends that you've been talking to in terms of the challenges or opportunities in your family enterprise. But then when you can go up to the provincial level and engage with the province, with the Alberta Business Family Institute, that just broadens that nucleus. And then again, being able to go up to Family Enterprise Canada level, it just broadens it all that much more to be national in scope. And so it just creates more opportunity for that reciprocity of sharing that I was just talking about when you talk about community. So I feel like these organizations are so critically important to family enterprises, because we don't know what we don't know. When we're working 24/7 in our businesses, we don't know that we need to be thinking about transition planning, leadership development. We need to be thinking about estate planning and share structure and all of those things that we need to have on our radar when we look at transitioning to the next generation. And, just that bigger question on, as a family enterprise, do you want to transition to the next generation? That's critically important. You need to answer that question first and foremost. And if the answer is yes, then there's a ton of planning that needs to be done and a lot of work that needs to be done with the next generation in order to prepare them for that eventuality. And if the answer is no, then you need to make your business ready for sale. And there's a lot of work that goes into doing that so that you can realize the best economic outcome for your family when you get to that point of sale or transition.
Shauna, as you mentioned we don't know, there's so many business owners that I speak to who are consumed by working in their business, that the idea of working on their business it's very daunting. Can you touch a little bit, and you spoke of the Family Business Institute, and I know there are many other institutes across the country and worldwide within these universities. Some of these families don't see themselves as a family enterprise, and that's what I admire of what you're doing with the Alberta Chamber now, is that there are these businesses disguised as they don't see themselves as that family business, and really, in fact, they are. So how do you see families identifying themselves in that way?
So this is, I couldn't tell you how many times I've had this question asked of me, Corey, what is a family business? And essentially the bottom line answer is if you think you're a family business, you probably are a family business. And there are so many different ways to be a family business. It's not necessarily generational. It could be that you're in business with your brother or your sister, or you had your parents invest in your company, or you're getting advice or mentorship from your aunt or your uncle. I mean, there are so many ways that our families support us when we're in business. And when you talk about being a family business, one of the major challenges for us is communication, because we are families. And I think that's pretty prevalent across lots of businesses that have aspects of family in them. Now, if you're talking about a multi-generational family enterprise, then you're talking about something different. You're talking about a systemic transition of wealth and operations from generation to generation. So if that is what you truly want to be, if you truly want to be a multi-generational family enterprise, that's a different set of parameters, because we're looking at, again, like I said, the big challenges of transitioning from one generation to the next, and great opportunities that presents too in the next generation, but being really systemic about paying attention to leadership development, who's gonna be stepping into some of these roles, making sure there's policies in place and criteria so that it's very clearly defined for the next generation what they need to do in order to be prepared and qualified to even come into that family business, and making sure that's clearly communicated. How are they being educated? How are we mentoring them? What is their leadership development plan? What is our family employment policy? Making all of those pieces very, very structured. That's not usual in a lot of family businesses. A lot of times there's a lot of this, okay, I know, in a very traditional format, oldest son to oldest son. So I just know that, Joe is going to take it over, and, when I'm ready to retire, he's just going to be there. And that's not the case anymore. And we're smashing those traditional kind of models as well, in terms of who's taking over, when are they taking over? It's not the oldest son, it's the youngest daughter, because at the end of the day, we've put the criteria in place and realized that she's actually the best one qualified to be the CEO. Really understanding the unique gifts of our children as well, and where do they fit in? Because not everybody is going to want to be the CEO. If we have 3 children, how do we allow for that and make sure that we're planning for that? And so that was a really long-winded answer to your question, but family businesses come in all shapes and sizes. What I would caution is that if you want to be a multi-generational family enterprise, really think about that and think about how you're planning for it starting today, because today is the day to start. It's never too soon to start planning for this. I've given many presentations where I've said, ultimately, no matter what kind of business you are, if you're really, really smart, you will start succession planning the day you write your business plan. in terms of making sure that it is on your radar always to be paying attention to what are the next steps and because businesses evolve and grow too. Family businesses evolve and they grow and they get much more complex. And being able to prepare for that and have that on your radar consistently in terms of what are those characteristics and qualifications we're going to need in the next iteration of leader. And so if you're doing that right from the beginning, you should be well prepared when the time comes.
And I love what you just said, Shauna, of succession should be a part of your business plan. Start with the end in mind. And what a lot of people don't understand is a business that is ready for transition of high value and also tends to be extremely profitable. So there's other strategic benefits that do fit into that business plan of why you might want to have your business ready. And Shauna,
can I just add something there? Just a tidbit that I just
yes.
So just an incredibly smart third generation family business owner and I were having a conversation and he shared with me, he said, you know what? I started my business, or I came into my business, my family business, and my first thought was always that my business at any point in time would be up for sale. He said, I never really had, this long-term lens, and they were in the process of transitioning to the fourth generation. So they were very successful. But he said he said, I always ran my business like I would be able to sell it tomorrow. And by doing that, created such a solid business in terms of the ability to grow and capitalize on opportunities, reinvestment into the business versus harvesting out in dividends, those types of things that he did just because he was always thinking about what would happen if I wanted to sell it tomorrow and am I prepared for that? And I think that's just such a thoughtful way of thinking about any business owner running their business, being sure that, if somebody came to me tomorrow, I would have a saleable business that I could capitalize and monetize the most. Yeah.
Absolutely. And unsolicited offers do come about, and being prepared for them is important. Now, going back to the communication within the family, let's maybe bring those two concepts together a little bit. In a family that's preparing for family succession, and maybe there is an offer that comes knocking that is too hard to turn up. Have you seen that within the space? And can you talk a little bit on that front, Shauna?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a couple of things to be thinking about here. First and foremost, does your family have a structure of communication whereby you can have these conversations? So do you have a dedicated family council, for instance, where the family can get together, in a neutral environment and have some of those open, frank discussions when these type of opportunities come into play, so that, everybody has a voice, everybody has the option to be heard, especially if they're part of an ongoing transition or succession plan that's happening within the family. Because then, as long as we're all heard, we can manage to mitigate the conflict that's going to arise if there's disagreements in terms of how the family should proceed in a situation like that. So ensuring that your family has that medium to have those open, really honest, transparent conversations in an environment where everybody feels safe and heard is critically important. And some of the critical teachings of all of the coursework that we do around family enterprises and creating that environment. And then the second piece to that is really thinking about post-sale then. Let's say the family decides, yes, we're gonna capitalize on this. Like we're being offered double what we thought we would get for this. So we are going to capitalize on this for the good of the family. That event happens, then all of a sudden you transition from a family that's operating a business to a family that's managing wealth. And you still are a family enterprise at that point because you are still managing the assets, you're still managing the investments. Maybe, you're thinking about getting into philanthropy because you've had that much of a windfall and you want to start giving back. So the family business doesn't go away. The family enterprise doesn't go away because now all of a sudden you have to transition to ensuring that this wealth or this liquidity event is going to support for future generations. Again, back to that question, are you truly an enterprising family? Is the intent of all this work that you provide this continuity of wealth for generations to come. And in that case, even though you do have a liquidity event, you are transitioning and you still need to manage the wealth, and you need to manage it for the family members and provide those resources. In a lot of cases, I mean, so many family businesses and family business leaders, like serial entrepreneurs. I've seen it over and over again. So a lot of times there may be a liquidity event and then they shift into managing the wealth. And then all of a sudden, 12 months down the road, there's this great opportunity and they're going to get back into another operating company. Or maybe different members of the family have different, visions and passions. And maybe we're going to all of a sudden invest in a bunch of different businesses so that our family has other opportunities in terms of different industries or exposures. So kind of like a snowball, it doesn't really stop at that liquidity event. It really can just keep going and again, provide more economic spin-off and benefit for that family.
Let's go a little bit back to the first community that we mentioned and, the way that the families are involved in the community locally and the projects and events and supporting that, how maybe they define themselves, transitioning from that operating company to managing the wealth. And some of the things that I've seen along the way is people defining themselves that this is who we are. Our business name is how we're seen. Can you touch a little bit on that from your perspective of what you've seen? Because sometimes that serial entrepreneur is not only an opportunity for profit and to make money, but also get back in from that perspective.
Well, I mean, I think any entrepreneur is incredibly tied to the businesses that they operate, in so many ways, especially in that first generation as they're growing the business. That's just as much their baby as their son or daughter. And in a lot of cases, they maybe spend more time with that baby than they actually get to spend with their actual children because they are so dedicated to growing it. And so how can you not? I mean, any of us who have ever been entrepreneurs, how can you not, get really wrapped up with that being part of your identity? And so then that identity, again, how you present yourself within your community is very much your self-esteem and a part of who you are in terms of being recognized when you go out in the community and people appreciating and valuing what you bring to the community and how you support the community. And so I don't think that goes away if there's a liquidity event. I think the legacy is still there and those individuals are still held in the same esteem. I think they just need to find other ways to contribute to their community. And, in so many cases, we see a lot of these individuals going into philanthropy, for instance, finding other ways to invest, volunteering, spending, now all of a sudden they have all this time on their hands. Volunteering within their communities is a huge place where we see a lot of these individuals going in terms of giving back. And not just even within their communities, volunteering internationally with different programs going around the world to support the needs of, people in disenfranchised communities that need help. So I think I'd like to think that our identity doesn't stop when the business is sold. I think that, we build that persona and we build that reputation for ourselves. And again, these individuals never slow down. It's not like they're going to jump on their lazy boy and start watching golf for the rest of their life, because that's just not who they are. They're used to going 100 miles an hour, 24/7. So they're always going to find other ways. And, in a lot of cases, that liquidity event just gives them more ability to expand where and how they're, supporting their community or communities or their, additional volunteer endeavors, whatever those may be.
Yes, so that's great. And talking about community on a bigger picture and some of the work that you've been doing from a Chamber of Commerce perspective. In our last episode, we talked to Trevor McLean and the work that he's doing at M&P in the agricultural business space. And, we talked about the trends of consolidation within the farming sector and what that means. Can you speak a little bit, not just within, of course, how important farming is to our economy in Western Canada, but how important these family enterprises are, and some of these businesses in smaller communities, and how important these transitions are to those communities.
Yeah, and I mean, the transition challenge is prevalent, in every jurisdiction in the world. Where it becomes really challenging is smaller communities where those are cornerstone businesses. Those producers are cornerstone businesses, those dealerships, those stores, those things, those gas stations are actual services that those communities need. And if for some reason we can't successfully transition them, then we create a hole in that community. And then all of a sudden we create exodus because, I mean, if you're in a small rural community in southern Alberta and you can't fill your vehicle because the gas station is shut down, or you can't buy groceries or milk, within 2 minutes from your house, and you have to actually travel into cities to do that type of stuff. A lot of times that's when we kind of lose that momentum for these communities and lose some of those, some of those people that really are providing value and can be incredibly impactful in terms of the continuity of that community itself. And so that's why it's just so incredibly important, especially in rural communities, that we pay a lot of attention to what is happening on our main street. And, from, as a municipal perspective, if I was in economic development in any rural community in the province right now, one of the first things I would be thinking of is doing an inventory. Go out and talk to those businesses, talk to all of your local businesses, find out where they're at in the transition and succession planning process, and support them and find them the resources and tools that they're going to need to either successfully sell and make sure that business is shored up in that community, or support them when they're looking to transition to another family member. And again, agriculture specifically is one of the more challenging ones, because what's happened with agriculture is that you don't necessarily, it's so much a way of life that you don't necessarily pull the operations out of the assets. And so that's one of the biggest challenges we're seeing for family enterprises in that specific industry right now, is that you've got this huge asset worth millions and millions and millions of dollars, being the land and the equipment. How do you put that burden on to the next generation? Because it's just not realistic to expect that they can go out and take out a $25 million or $50 million loan. So being really creative, and there's some really creative ways this is happening in terms of managing to separate the operations and the shares from the actual assets, and how do we look at a longer term transition for some of those bigger pieces, but still being able to turn over control to the next generation is critically important. And I think I'm just really, really excited about some of those really thoughtful and unique ways that those transitions are taking place, because specifically in agriculture, it's more challenging just because of the structure. And it's nice to see too, though, that, the traditional model of passing to the oldest male that we've seen in that industry for a long time has really been shattered. And we're seeing everybody taking on those transitions because they're looking now at who's most passionate in the family about continuing that legacy, that way of life, that lifestyle, that stewardship, which is so important to these family enterprises.
And wow, many good nuggets in there, Shauna. I many questions that I'll dig a little further into. One of the things that you said about farming specifically, and the assets and the operations being together, just drawing back on some of the conversation around succession and preparing that next generation, because ownership and operations have two separate succession that need to happen from that perspective. Is preparing that next generation to be a good owner, and the conversation that we've been having of, what does it mean to be the leader of the business, and specifically the term CEO. How do you see families transitioning the leadership of the business with the separate from the ownership.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I'm just going to back up a bit, and maybe I'm not going to assume that all the people listening to your podcast know about the 3-circle model. So maybe what I'll do is just do a really high level overview of how we systemically look at a family enterprise. And so when we look at a family enterprise, we think about it in 3 interfacing circles: the family in one circle, the business in one circle, and ownership in another circle. So the conversation earlier where I was talking about the family needs a mechanism to really be talking about these decisions, like the sale of the business, that's in the family circle. And we would look at putting in place a family meeting or a family council. In the business, of course, that's the CEO, that's the individual who's in the operations running the business day to day, or any of the family members that are in that business contributing to the growth and expansion and the profitability of that business. And then the 3rd circle is the actual people who own the company. So in a lot of cases, when you look at agriculture transitions, if we want to talk about that specifically, generally you're looking at it's mom and dad for the most part. That's who owns it. Maybe it's brothers, depending on the structure of how it was transitioned and how many generations it's transitioned. Maybe it's cousins. But in any case, there's a group of shareholders in the generation that's in the senior generation. And let's, for simplicity, say mom and dad own the shares. Of course, they own all the assets. They own all the land. They, of course, are key in the operations. Mom and dad have been running the farm and, doing all of the decision-making from an operational perspective, where to sell, when to sell, all of those types of things. Now, when you look at the next generation, let's assume that mom and dad have 3 kids and only one of them has any interest in the operation, the actual running of the farm. So how do you then, in that business, transition that ownership of leadership and the operations of the business to that one individual, while still understanding that you have 3 children? As parents, you have 3 children that you need to make sure all benefit from the farm and the transition as it happens, and then also benefit, at the time where mom and dad pass on, and how can we ensure that those 3 kids with very different kind of views on that transition? Because as you can imagine, if you've got, the daughter that's taking over and she's there 24/7, building the business, building the enterprise up, and, her sister and brother are off, making their own money, doing their own thing, building their own careers, how do you equate that? And we always say it's, fair versus equal. They're two very, very different things. So how do you treat that operating child in an equitable way with the other 2 siblings that are not on the farm and contributing to operations? And that's really, when you look at share structure, where we talk about that in terms of, so how are we going to distribute these shares? How are these siblings going to work together when they're very different types of shareholders? So we have very different types of shareholders, right? We have active shareholders who are in the business. We have passive shareholders that have nothing to do with the business, but still probably want their dividends or some sort of reward out of that system. And so that's really where the transition plan is so critically important. And then again, in the agriculture system, with the assets being what they are, being able to transition the operations to that daughter that wants to run the farm, to continue to run the farm, doing that in a way that also accounts for the long-term transition or eventual transition of the assets down the road at some point, and then balancing those expectations of that working child with the other 2 that are passive shareholders. So it's very different in terms of the leadership transition. What do you need to do to get that daughter ready to take over that farm? And have you essentially been doing it since she was born? Probably. And does she need additional supports? I mean, farming is very complex business these days. It's not the traditional model that we think about. It's very complex. You need to understand markets. You need to understand your commodity. You need to understand how to maximize yields and how to maximize production, whatever agriculture industry you're in. Very, very complex stuff that the next generation needs to be really on top of. So how do you train her to take that over, make sure that she can do that effectively without hamstringing her with millions and millions of dollars in debt to outright purchase the land, whatever that looks like. And then how do you ensure that the three siblings maintain harmony and can work together as shareholders and have those discussions about, okay, we had a really great year. Are we taking it out in dividends, or are we going to invest it in a new piece of machinery that's going to yield us this kind of return on investment? Those are the conversations as shareholders they need to be having. So I hope that was a lot of conversation, but hopefully that kind of clarifies where the conversations need to happen and why it's so critically important that we put some guardrails around the conversations happening with the right individuals in the right place, and ensuring that we're treating individuals equitably within the system in terms of where they reside.
Well, and Shauna, it's not just farming that has this issue. It's looking at other industries, maybe manufacturing. There's many family enterprises that, when you take a look at the assets and the wealth, the financial wealth of the family, a lot of times real estate, whatever it might be, if it's raw land and farming or real estate with a building, could be the largest asset. And being creative, as you say, with how do you transition that operations possibly separate from some of those other assets that support the business as well.
Yeah, and that's when you see, so, in the FIA course, we talk about the family enterprise model, but that's when it happens is during those transitions. That's when we need to start thinking about pulling out, the operating company from all of the other assets. So, meaning what I mean by that is there's real estate assets, there's financial assets, there's life insurance, there's heirloom assets in terms of potentially there's family cabins or vacation properties. There's potentially philanthropy or philanthropic endeavors that we need to be pairing out. And so it becomes quite complex as you look at transitioning to the next generation, because, the operating company is one thing, but if you have a robust giving or philanthropic arm to your family enterprise, at some point as that continues to grow, you're going to need somebody that's going to be able to pay attention to that. Same with real estate assets. You're going to need somebody who can pay attention to those and really ensure that they are meeting their full potential and creating the best monetary value for the family. And so it actually, the nice thing about it is when you look at a family enterprise and all of the buckets, and then there's all of the socioeconomic benefits too from family, their education, their experience, all of the knowledge they can bring back. But when you look at it like that, it becomes very complex, but it also provides a lot of opportunity in the next generation. Because let's just go back to the family farm example. Maybe I'm not that daughter that wants to stay on the farm and run the operations, but maybe I am that daughter who would love to run the philanthropy side of things. Maybe we've invested a whole bunch of money in a foundation, whatever the case may be. Maybe that's my passion, and maybe that's where I can provide most value. Or maybe I have, great ideas about how we can utilize the land in other ways, creative new ways of generating additional revenue. So again, it's very complex. At the end of the day, we know it's very complex. That's why the bottom line is you need to be planning today. If you haven't started thinking about it, you need to be planning today, and not just family enterprises. But I just would encourage, again, as an organization that represents over 20,000 businesses in the province, through our members, I would just really could not underline enough that you need to be thinking about this stuff. You need to be thinking about next steps. And by doing that, actually, and really thinking about how would my business be most saleable tomorrow, or how would I be able to transition it tomorrow, you're actually doing yourself a great service in terms of ensuring that your business has been optimized and that you are running at the best possible level that you can be running at, and that you're taking advantage of opportunities as they arise, and you're able to, continue to grow and expand your operations. Because as we know, if you're not growing or expanding, you're declining. So, and any business owner knows that you need to be constantly looking at that as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Shauna, as we near the end of our conversation today, I think that this is a great way to transition. There's a few questions that I ask each guest. Are you ready for the hard ones?
Sure. So the rapid fire round, is that what's going on here?
That's right. Yes.
One word answers. Yeah.
Well, short answers, I think, and feel free to expand if you think that we need to. And so the first question is, what is one key strategy that you believe is most essential for building a successful family enterprise?
Communication structure, first and foremost. I think every single instance where you hear in the headlines of family businesses imploding on themselves or things going horribly wrong, it's because there was a fundamental lack of communication and a fundamental lack of structure for the family to communicate effectively in a way that's neutralized and provides them the ability to have their voice heard. Because critically important in family enterprises, we know how to push each other's buttons, and we know how to hurt each other much quicker. One of the mentors and advisors that I really admire, Donald Cooper. So that was Cooper Canada Family. So anybody who played hockey at any point wore his name on some part of their body, or had golf clubs, or huge family enterprise. And his saying was, family businesses are businesses where blood boils at room temperature. I always loved that, and that always stayed with me. And so I think being able to ensure that blood doesn't start boiling and we can have those conversations before they become a conflict is the most critical thing for family enterprises. That openness and transparency is just so critical, especially when I'm talking about the complexity. There's a lot of decisions to be made. There's a lot of policies that need to be in place, a lot of conversations that need to happen, and those need to happen in a structured way that everybody feels heard and can really participate in the outcomes, positive outcomes for the enterprise.
Great. And what is the most common challenge you see family enterprises encountering when it comes to wealth transition and generational continuity?
I think that one of the biggest ones is just the expectation without conversation. I'll put it that way. The expectation that people are just going to fall into certain roles because that's what we think they should do, without ever asking them what they want. I think that happens way more often than we think. We just assume because they're our kids, or because they're our brother or sister, or whatever the case may be, or because they're our parents, or they're our aunt and uncle. We just assume we know them and we know what they want, and we just make decisions based on our assumptions and never have the conversations. That's why it's so important to start this process early, because if you're expecting that daughter to take over the farm because she's been, passionate about it, working in it, you never asked her, and you go to make the transition plan, and she says, well, no, I never planned on staying after mom and dad left. What do you do then? So again, I think that expectation of where people are going to fit in to the transition planning has to be eliminated. You need to have those conversations right out of the gate. And we do a lot of it. This one family I worked with many years ago, one of the very first families I worked with, actually, it was a daughter and father, a really successful family business. And they worked really well together. They'd had these conversations. They'd been talking about the transition plan. Everything was fantastic. And then 6 months later, things are imploding. So go back into, just question, like, what's going on? You had this leadership plan in place, what's going on? And the daughter says, well, dad doesn't want to give up any control. He absolutely won't give up any control. And you talk to dad, and dad says, she's not asking to take over any leadership. So they wanted the same thing, but there were expectations there that the other one was going to be the first to make the move. And so ensuring that that's clearly articulated in terms of, okay, so starting Monday, this is what we're going to do. And here's what we're going to do for the next year, the next 3 years, the next 5 years, so that when that time comes and I'm ready to step away, whatever that looks like, you're ready, and we've given you all the tools and resources we need. But again, expectations, right? We just make assumptions. We're human, and we make it more with our own family than anyone else. So that would be my thing. Make sure you have the conversations at the gate. Don't just assume you know what people want.
Fantastic. And you answered my next question. So I think that's a great strategy, really, is to just have those conversations and don't assume that you know what everyone else is thinking.
Absolutely.
Shauna, in your experience, what would you say is the top three qualities successful family enterprise leaders possess? And this can be leaders in any generation or any part of the enterprise.
Yeah, I think being entrepreneurial, being innovative, and being highly empathetic in terms of their leadership will generate, fantastic outcomes for them. And what I mean by that is, you know what, you have to be entrepreneurial to run a business. You have to be entrepreneurial, and you have to be in a family enterprise. You have to be multi-generational entrepreneurs, and you have to be breeding that into your kids at a very young age. That could be a simple thing, like in my example, sweeping hair off a floor in a salon provided me that opportunity to see how a business ran. So that entrepreneurial piece, innovative, because, as family enterprises transition, we have this stupid saying, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, but it plays out more often than not. So that next generation needs to be innovative and thinking about what is the next iteration of this business, and how am I going to continue to grow that wealth and that pot for the next generation, really taking on more of that innovative stewardship role of thinking, okay, how am I going to make this better when I pass it off to the next generation from what was given to me when I took over? And then empathetic. You just have to be, as a leader, any leader, empathy is the biggest gift you can give another human being, and just so critically important when you're dealing with family, because sometimes that goes right out the door when we get into some of our heated conflicts. So just really embracing empathy and being, that type of a leader that leads with your mind, but also with your heart.
That's awesome, Shauna. And I wanted to make sure that we had the chance to cover everything. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with our audience that we didn't get a chance to touch on today?
No, just that, I don't know if I can put a plug in, but
Please
again,
do.
no longer in this space as much, but, just leading the Alberta Chambers of Commerce has just been, it was a passion of mine prior to taking over the role as a volunteer. So there you go. It was a volunteer role that I was in for, 15 years. I volunteered for Chambers of Commerce because I truly believe the value that they provide to their communities across the province, across the country, across the world, and the value that they provide our businesses around advocacy, policy, data, research, the ability to tap into that broader network, whether it be locally, provincially, nationally, or internationally. There is no organization like it. So anybody who's listening, I would highly encourage you to take a look at becoming part of your local chamber and finding out what value can be added to your business. Some of this, you don't know what you don't know. Chambers are fantastic conduits for education, resources, all of those tools that you may need. And they're a great place to start if you're, trying to find your way down this path and don't really know what resources are out there or where to begin. They're fantastic places to go. And everybody there is also friendly, trust me. So that would be my plug, if that's okay. Just really
Perfect.
really connect with your local chamber.
Great plug. And I think that exactly what listeners need to hear is tying back to the community conversation that we've had is the Chamber of Commerce really is a great community. And, your involvement is really an amazing legacy. The years that you've spent, Shauna, I think is fantastic. And what you've given back to the business community in this country is fantastic. So I wanted to thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time today to share your expertise and experiences with us today. It's been incredibly valuable, and we're grateful for the contribution to this episode.
It's been my pleasure, Corey. And if anybody wants to reach out, I think you're going to share my contact details. So I'm always happy to answer questions and recruit you to the chamber movement. I'm happy to do that. So feel free to reach out. And thanks again for having me, Corey.
As we conclude this insightful discussion with Shauna Feth, we hope you gained valuable insights into the intricate world of family enterprises. Throughout our conversation, Shauna emphasized the critical aspects of continuity planning, the significance of fostering open dialogues with family councils, and the vital role of community engagement in sustaining family businesses. We've explored the challenges and opportunities surrounding leadership transitions and the importance of identifying unique gifts within the next generation, and the continuous evolution of family enterprises. Remember, sustaining and evolving family enterprises require ongoing focus and planning, fostering open dialogue and embracing community connections. I want to express my deepest gratitude for Shauna for generously sharing her time, expertise, and knowledge with us. If you'd like to learn more about Shauna and her engagements and contributions to family businesses, you can find her at Alberta Chamber of Commerce. We've provided all of her information and links in the show notes. Thank you for joining me, Corey Gagnon, your host of Legacy Builders Podcast. It's my personal passion to explore with you these topics related to family wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, you can subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast platform. And don't forget to share this episode with family, friends, and colleagues who you care about. If you'd like to help support this show, you can do so by leaving a rating and review. If you have any questions about anything shared on today's episode, or have topics you'd like us to dive deeper into in future episodes, please let us know by emailing beaconfamilyoffice@asante.com. That's beaconfamilyoffice@assante.com. Legacy Builders, Strategies for Building Successful Family Enterprises is brought to you by Beacon Family Office at Asante. Are you worried about losing what you've created and seeking ways to transition your wealth across generations? Beacon Family Office at Asante supports our clients transition their wealth while maintaining relationships. If you'd like to access more content we've created, you can visit us at beaconfamilyoffice.com or for more details on our services and book an initial call. Thanks again for listening, and until next episode, stay intentional about building your legacy. This program was prepared by Corey Gagnon, who is a senior wealth advisor with Beacon Family Office at Asante Financial Management Limited. This is not an official program of Asante Financial Management, and the statements and opinions expressed during this podcast are not necessarily those of Asante Financial Management. This show is intended for general information only and may not apply to all listeners or investors. Please obtain professional financial advice or contact us at beaconfamilyoffice@asante.com or visit beaconfamilyoffice.com to discuss your particular circumstances prior to acting on the information presented.